Hi there. So today we're going to talk about the truth about grief that nobody tells you. And in this video, I'm going to cover what grief is, what triggers it, how to support someone who's experiencing grief, and how to deal with your own feelings of grief and loss. In our culture, we're so uncomfortable talking about emotions, about death, about sadness, about grief, that we often avoid the topic altogether. And then we're missing the skill set for how to handle this complex topic. Recently, the anniversary of my brother's birthday passed. He would have been 53, but he passed away 3 years ago to cancer. And so when his birthday came up once again, I thought this year I would feel differently, that it would feel lighter, but it still triggered some feelings in me. And it's really important to know that grief is not linear. It's not something where you go to a funeral and the feelings are over. It tends to be cyclical. So things like anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, even seeing somebody's handwriting or hearing their voice on a video or seeing a photo or a favorite song can be enough to trigger feelings of grief in a person. And this is completely normal. It doesn't mean that you're going backwards. It doesn't mean that you're failing if a few years later you're still experiencing the feelings of sadness or loneliness when a memory of your loved one comes up. And we can experience grief for a number of different reasons. It can be because a loved one has passed away. It can also be because we've lost a pet or because we've gone through a divorce or separation. And really, grief is love with nowhere to go. It's missing somebody at those familiar times or in those familiar places where we would have experienced them before. So it's very common to have these feelings come up when you're least expecting them, to have it hit you like a wave coming in on shore. And to me, that's what grief is more like. It's less like a straight line that you evolve through and then you never think about the person again. It's more like waves that come in and then they go back out and then they come back in. So grief is not something we learn to get over. It's something we learn to live with. We learn to live with the absence of someone in our life, to start to move forward and to do things without them, without forgetting about them, but while being able to carry on our life so that even though somebody else's life might have stopped, ours doesn't have to as well. So, if someone in your life is experiencing grief right now, let's talk about some things that you can do and some things that you can avoid doing in order to make things easier for them. So, I'm going to share a little bit about my own personal story. I've experienced quite a bit of loss in my life. I lost my husband to cancer when I was 22. I lost my mom to Alzheimer's when I was 35. I've since lost my father, my brother, my stepdaughter, and a number of cousins, aunts, and uncles. So a lot of people who are very dear to me. And I have a fair bit of experience with what those feelings feel like, with what it takes to move through them, but also with what it feels like when somebody says or does the wrong thing. Again, in our culture, we just don't know how to talk about grief, how to talk about death. So we feel uncomfortable around it. And there can be a tendency to want to avoid the person altogether, but the person really needs your support in times like this. So I would recommend reaching out, letting them know you care, and letting them know that their presence is valuable in your life, even if they're not feeling great. Give them permission to not be okay. The second thing I'd like to share is to not avoid the topic altogether. So again, we think that if we talk about what just happened, we're going to make the person feel worse, but generally that's not how it works. Most people do want to talk about their experience because they want to feel understood and they want to feel like you care. And in the case of someone who's passed away, most people, there can be exceptions to this, but most people want to talk about their loved one because they want to keep their memory alive. So don't avoid the topic. Feel free to ask the person how they're feeling and ask them if they want to share, and they will let you know. Another thing to avoid doing is to offer platitudes, to try to figure out the right words to say to make somebody feel better. The truth is that shouldn't be the objective. It's not about making somebody feel better because you're not going to make them feel better. They're going to be sad for a while, and that's okay. When I lost my husband, I was only 22. And I remember at his funeral how many things people said that were well meaning, but really, really not helpful. Things like, well, they're in a better place now, as if being with me was such a terrible place to be. Or God can only give you what you can handle, which didn't feel true to me at all because I felt like I could not handle my grief and my pain. Or probably the the worst one, which was, well, you're young, you'll get married again. Not the thing you want to hear on the day of your partner's funeral. So most of the time when it comes to figuring out what to say to somebody who's grieving, less is more. Something simple like, I'm really sorry that you're going through this. I'm really sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry that so and so has passed away. If you say too much, you're likely to say something that will step on the other person's toes. And usually, when we're trying to get somebody to feel better, we're doing that somewhat selfishly because we're uncomfortable with their discomfort. The very best thing you can do for someone who's grieving is simply to be present, to hold space for them, for their emotions, often without saying anything. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to assume that the way you would handle grief and loss is the way they would handle it. We're all different. Some people go into freeze mode and they shut down and they don't want to talk. Some people want to talk a lot. Other people just want to have company. And the truth is, you can't know unless you ask. So the best thing you can do is ask the other person what they need. Do you just need some company? Do you want to talk? Or would you rather do something else to take your mind off of things? Do you need help? So by asking those questions, you're inviting them to share what it is that they would most appreciate from you. And finally, my last suggestion when it comes to supporting somebody who's going through grief is to not offer unsolicited advice. Again, I think people are meaning well, but I remember when my husband passed away, being advised to take off my wedding ring and clear out his closet the week after he died. And I listened because I was too young to know any different. And that was way too soon for me to be taking those steps. And I really regretted it afterwards. So instead of offering advice or thinking that you know how somebody should handle things, it's really just better to offer some kind of practical help, like, can I bring you a meal? Can I go get some groceries for you? Can I help you clean your house? Can I take care of your kids or your pets? Can I go get the mail? Just offer practical help. That's usually the best kind of help that somebody needs when they're struggling. So, long story short, if somebody that you know is grieving, don't avoid them, don't avoid the topic, don't worry too much about what to say, and just keep it simple and ask the other person what they need. What I can tell you for sure, having been through this a few times, is the people who are most dear to me in my life are the ones who showed up for me when I was struggling. They're the ones who checked in. They're the ones who asked me how I was doing. They're the ones who offered practical help. They're the ones who just sat with me and held space and gave me permission to not be okay, to not be at my best. That is the best thing you can do for somebody who is grieving. So let's talk about what to do if you're experiencing feelings of grief. So again, grief comes in waves. It tends to be cyclical. It's not a straight line. So you're not feeling if you feel like you have moved through it and then suddenly you get hit by another wave. That's completely normal. So I'm going to give you 5 tips for how to move through your feelings of grief so that they don't feel so overwhelming. Now, the first tip might seem counterintuitive because we think that avoiding how we feel is the best way to not feel that way, but that actually isn't true. Emotions are energy in motion. They're meant to move through your body. So the best thing you can do is to sit down with your feelings, to put your hand on your heart and close your eyes for a minute and just connect with what you're feeling. Connect with the feelings of sadness and loss and loneliness and pain, or even anger or resentment, whatever feelings are coming up for you. Just notice where they are in your body, name them, feel them, and give a voice to them by writing in a journal, or you can share with a supportive person, or you can simply allow the tears to flow. When you cry, it's actually a really healing thing. It's allowing cortisol to leave your body. It's allowing the pain to leave your body. When we stuff our emotions down, suppressed emotions come back in one of 3 ways: as physical illness, as mental illness, or as relationship problems. So it's a lot better to sit with your emotions and give yourself some time to process them. So the second thing to do is to practice self-care. Your body is going to need extra support. It's very common when you're grieving to feel confused, to feel like you can't remember things, like you misplace things, or you can't seem to get your act together, you can't seem to get anything done. That's your nervous system just shutting down, and that's very normal. So don't expect too much from yourself during this time. Don't expect yourself to carry on with all the level of activity that you normally do with work or caregiving or whatever things you do. Give yourself a break, give yourself some space and time to heal, and take really good care of your physical vessel, your body. That means healthy food, lots of water, warm, comforting things like soups and teas and cozy clothes and fuzzy blankets can all be really helpful during this time. The third tip I can offer is to move your body. Very often when we're experiencing grief, we tend to just sit still. We kind of go into freeze mode. And the problem with that is that the emotions don't have anywhere to go. They need to be able to move out of your body. So gentle types of movement like Tai Chi or yoga or walking are really great movements to do, or even just some simple stretching can also help to move some of the energy through your body. The fourth thing I can suggest is to connect with others. Now, this again might seem counterintuitive because we have a tendency to isolate ourselves when we're feeling sad, when we're not feeling good. But isolation is just going to make the feelings worse over time. And that can eventually lead to depression if you do it for too long. So, my recommendation would be to find one person to connect with each day over text, over phone, over video, or in person. Reach out to one supportive person who may understand you. And if you don't have anybody who is supportive in your life, you may want to consider joining a support group for people who are grieving or finding a professional who can help you with your feelings. So I have one final suggestion if you're experiencing feelings of grief and struggling to move through them, and that is to find a way to honor the memory of your loved one. There's many different ways you can do this. As you can see here, I have a photo collage of pictures of my mom and my dad and my brother who's passed. My sister created this. She's a graphic designer, and it's been a really great place for me to be able to come and to think about them when I want to. So it's kind of a little bit of a memorial altar area that I've set up. There's also candles that you can sometimes get from the funeral home, or you can create your own online. Many places offer them. I have some special mementos here. I have my dad's baseball cap, and I have one for my brother as well. I have my dad's Gibson guitar that I will sometimes play songs, family songs for him and my brother, because we used to all sing in four-part harmony in our family. For my mom, I've planted a lilac bush out front of my house because we both love flowers, and in particular, we love the scent of lilacs. And the really cool thing about that is it blooms right between Mother's Day and her birthday every year. And another thing you can do also is to, if you're spiritually open to this, to ask for signs from your loved ones who passed over. I'm a big believer, having gone through this multiple times now and watched people die, that we're not just a physical form. We're not just flesh and blood, so to speak. And when we die, the animating force in us, our spirit, goes somewhere. It leaves our body, and it goes to whatever you want to call it. I believe we return to source energy. Some people call that heaven. Different people have different names for it. To me, the name matters less than knowing that our loved ones live on. They're in a different form, and they can communicate with you if you ask them to, but you have to be open to it. You have to ask them, and you have to be watching for the potential signs. When my husband died, I asked him to come back and talk to me if he was able to. And at that point, I didn't know if that was possible or not. And the way he chose to communicate with me was by turning lights and electronics off and on, which scared the crap out of me. So after the washing machine came on by itself, and the lights came on by itself, and the dishwasher came on by itself, I asked him to find something further away and less scary to communicate to me with. And he chose shooting stars. So after that, every time I'd walk outside at night and think about him, phew, a shooting star would go. I've probably seen over 100 shooting stars, and I don't think that's normal. And that particularly happened in the first couple of years after he passed away. Usually once they know you're okay, they'll communicate with you less, unless you ask them to. And sometimes people reincarnate as well. So then they're less able to communicate after that. In the case of my mom, after she had passed away, I was really struggling with grief, and a friend sent me an article about a woman whose mother had passed and how her mother kept leaving her dimes. And at the time, I was annoyed by that story because that hadn't been happening for me. But I had read the article, gone into my therapist's office to talk to my therapist about the grief I was experiencing, came back out, went to pay, and she pulled an iPad out of her drawer so that I could pay. And I saw something shiny, and she kind of went like this and swiped it aside. And I asked her, well, what was that? She said, oh, it's a dime. I don't know what it's doing in here. I don't carry money. I don't carry any change. And my jaw dropped. And I said to her, I told her the story, and she said, well, here, I think this is for you. Since then, my kids and I have found a single dime in so many weird places that they should never have been, that I'm now a believer that this was my mom communicating with me and sharing with me. As you can see here, I've got a little container of all the dimes. Oops, she's left us over the years. So it's actually been kind of fun to see the strange places that she'll put them, including most recently at my daughter's high school graduation. I went to get up afterwards and I saw a single dime sitting by my chair. And since she was a school teacher, it made a lot of sense to me that she would actually be there. So other types of signs that you might see can include feathers. You might smell a scent that reminds you of the person. So feathers, dimes, lights going on and off, sometimes an object moving that reminds you of the person, a scent. There's quite a few different ways that somebody can communicate with you. So basically, if you ask them, and through songs as well, actually, my brother repeatedly would play the song Country Roads because that was one of our family's favorite songs. And it has played in very strange places, including in French communities that wouldn't usually play that song, or looping on a playlist. And then I go look at the playlist and it's not even on the playlist. So lots of strange happenings there when it comes to music, because my brother and I were very connected through music. So if you're open to it, you can ask your loved one to communicate with you. And for me, I found that to be very comforting, to know that even though I still miss them in human form, I miss their physical presence. It's not quite the same as talking to somebody or singing with my brother and father or having a hug or cooking with my mom. Like, it's not quite the same. However, feeling like I can communicate with them still feels very comforting. And another way that they can communicate with you is through birds. It's very common that they'll communicate through birds. Cardinals are a very common one, for example, that people often see after a loved one has passed. So remember that healing is a journey that takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have feelings of sadness. You are still worthy of being around, even if you're struggling. So don't isolate yourself. Find some supportive people who can hold space for you, who can include you in things even if you're not at your best. And remember that it will get better. And the best way to help it get better is to make space to actually feel your feelings. The more you make room for what you're feeling and give yourself time to process it, the more relief you'll eventually start to feel. To help you with this, I'm going to drop a link below this video to a recorded meditation to help you process your feelings of grief, in case that's helpful to you. I hope that this video has offered you some ideas that you find supportive. Take care, and bye for now.